Polyphemus, the sheep-herding, cheese-hoarding, man-eating savage Cyclops is, Odysseus aside, perhaps the most famous character in the Odyssey. In the last few videos I've focused on Odysseus, so now it's Polyphemus' turn. I've also been thinking about how folkloric and literary traditions work, and how they compare to modern pop culture franchises. Now, one trope which I'm sure you've noticed is the young X concept, whereby a popular character is reimagined in childhood or youth. I'm talking young Indiana Jones, young Sherlock, young Sheldon, and so on. One might see it as a cynical attempt to extract value from a franchise that's already run its course, or as a sophisticated way to exploring a character in a rawer, formative context. All these young X examples assume the audience's prior familiarity with the adult character and tend to exploit irony and foreshadowing. Although this trope is far from a modern invention, exactly the kind of thing that the 3rd century Hellenistic poets were into, Theocritus included, as typified by Theocritus' reimagining of teen Polyphemus the Cyclops as a lovesick young herdsman in Idyll XI. So I thought it would be fun to take a look at Idyll XI first, and maybe later revisit the original Polyphemus passage from Homer's Odyssey. Welcome to Ancient Classics. Theocritus' 11 Idyll commences with a brief address to his real-life pal, a physician poet called Nikias. I don't think there's any medicine, no smear ointment for love quite like song, Nikias. But a medicine that's sweet and easy for men to bear is hard to find. As a doctor, one so dear to the 9 muses, I think you know this well. And that's how our friend the Cyclops, the legendary Polyphemus, managed to get by when he fell in love with Galateia at an age when he was only just growing a bit of bum fluff round his temples and mouth. He courted her not with gifts of apples, roses, or lovelocks, but with absolute psychopathy, and he totally lost the plot. Often his sheep were left to leave lush pastures of their own accord, while he pined on a seaweed-strewn shore from daybreak, singing about Galateia, bearing a terrible wound in his heart, which one of great Aphrodite's arrows had inflicted deep within. And yet, he found a cure. Sitting on his crag overlooking the sea, he sang this song. I'm not entirely sure what the point of this intro is. With the final 2 lines, which are also written in Theocritus' voice, it does create a frame, and Theocritus and his pals love their frames. So this frame provides context and confirms that this Cyclops is not any random Cyclops, but Polyphemus of Odyssey fame himself, though the character of Polyphemus is famous enough without needing an introduction. Anyway, let's take it at face value. Polyphemus is pining for Galateia, presented here as some kind of nymph or minor sea goddess. The setting is not a new invention of Theocritus. The tale had been floating around for, I guess, well over 100 years. According to Athenaeus, the 5th to 4th century poet Philoxenos had tried to seduce Dionysios of Syracuse's mistress Galateia, and was sent to work in the quarries as a punishment. So he wrote a poem presenting Dionysios as Polyphemus in love with Galateia. Even Theocritus himself had featured this tale in his 6th Idyll, which may or may not have preceded this one. Ovid later turned this into a love triangle with Achaeus, but Achaeus was probably a later addition, so it's worth approaching this Idyll pretending you've never heard of him. But as for the broader setting, so a young Cyclops pining over a sea nymph. Is this supposed to strike us as funny and bizarre, a monster in love with a beautiful goddess? And this is actually rather difficult to unpack, because remember that Polyphemus in the Odyssey is the son of the god Poseidon and a sea nymph. So his infatuation with a nymph is not necessarily that ridiculous at all. If gods and goddesses can give birth to a Cyclops, then why shouldn't a Cyclops stand a chance with a minor sea nymph? He is the son of the sea god himself, after all. But yet, Polyphemus is a savage, ugly monster, and there's no denying that. Those of you used to the cliches of pastoral might well say, this is a parody of twee pastoral, but with monsters. And that is true, kind of, but also bizarrely the other way round. You see, pastoral as a genre was forming. Theocritus was just putting his poems out there, many of which happened to feature shepherds and stuff. But arguably it was only later poets like Virgil that formalized the pastoral genre, retrospectively anointing Theocritus as its founder. So, lovesick pan-piping Polyphemus is not necessarily a monstrous parody of the lovesick shepherd trope. He is the original lovesick shepherd. We must recall that Polyphemus was always a herdsman. It's crucial to the plot of Odyssey Book 9. And as for milky Galateia, her milkmaidness is in her name. In the 1st century, Virgil would write an Eclogue, Eclogue II, loosely modelled upon this idyll, featuring a human shepherd in much the same role. In other words, a complete reversal of the usual human cliché made into monster trope. But let's allow Polyphemus to begin his song. Fair Galateia, fairer to behold than cream cheese, floofier than a lamb, haughtier than a cow, shinier than a grape, why do you reject he who loves you? You come to me when sweet sleep takes hold of me, but you leave as soon as sweet sleep releases me. You flee like a ewe when she spies a grizzled wolf. I fell for you, girl, when you came with my mother to pick hyacinth flowers from the mountain tops, and I led the way. Ever since I saw you that first time, ever since then I've been unable to stop loving you. But you don't care. By Zeus, you just don't care. I know, beautiful girl, why you run away from me. It's because I have one shaggy eyebrow all across my forehead, stretching from ear to ear, a flat nose above my lip, and one eye. We take it for granted that the Cyclops, Polyphemus included, had one eye each, and that's the way they're usually, but not always, presented in the iconography. Some commentators state that in the Odyssey, Homer never specifies that Polyphemus has one eye, and so Theocritus is making this clear here, but I don't buy that. It's pretty damn clear from the context in Odyssey Book 9 that Polyphemus has one eye. It's next to impossible to read the description of his blinding otherwise. So why would Theocritus need to correct or clarify that? Unless he's making a jab at the legions of scholiasts and librarians who, by Theocritus's time, were picking the words of Homer apart. I can only guess that amongst those librarians you'd have had some misguided pedant saying, well, actually, I think you'll find that Homer doesn't actually say that Polyphemus has one eye. So maybe Theocritus is just targeting those guys. But anyway, what's crazy for me is I'm actually tearing up right now as I translate Polyphemus's words. I don't know why, but I actually find this poem more emotionally compelling than your usual run-of-the-mill love poetry. Perhaps the monster setting and the ironic distance gives me permission to actually feel. But then again, I did cry at King Kong. I mean, the 2005 remake. Well, that's me. But I care for a flock of 1,000, and from these I draw and drink the very best milk, and I'm never short of cheese, neither in summer, nor in autumn, nor at winter's end. My cheese racks are always stuffed full, and I can play the panpipes like no one amongst the Cyclops, singing about you, my darling sweet apple, often in the dead of night. Polyphemus says he plays the panpipes like no one, Utis, amongst the Cyclops. Utis, famously, is the name that Odysseus claims to have just before he blinds Polyphemus. So Polyphemus is foreshadowing that whole episode here, but it's kind of lame and obvious as foreshadowing goes. I'm more concerned about his panpiping and singing here. That's doubly problematic for me. First, because panpipes suck, and secondly, because how can you play panpipes and sing, which is what's implied here? Call me a pedant, but it's a nonsensical trope of the pastoral genre that doesn't seem to get called out enough. From memory, I'm fairly sure that there's an Amesianus poem where a herdsman sings songs on a reed pipe or something. Go figure. But anyway... And I'm rearing 11 fawns with cute little collars for you, and 4 little bear cubs. Come visit me, you'll have nothing less. Let the sea green waves beat against the shore. It'll be nicer in my cave when you spend the night with me. There are laurels there, and slender cypress trees, dark ivy, vines bearing sweet grapes. There's cool water and ambrosial drink which heavenly wooded Etna provides from its white snow cap. Who would choose the sea and waves? Now, even if I seem a little too hairy for your liking, there are oak logs and an ever-burning fire under a layer of ash. And burning for you, I'd give my soul. I'd give my one eye. Nothing is sweeter to me than that. Just a quick point here. Polyphemus' cave with all its stacked cheese, the place to which he's trying to lure Galateia, where he says it will be so nice for her to spend the night with him. This is the actual cave in which Odysseus' men get trapped. Their heads smashed in and eaten alive. Just don't forget that. Though, to be fair, Polyphemus never asked them to come. Alas, if only my mother had borne me with gills, so that I could dive down to kiss your hand, if you won't kiss me on the mouth. And I'd bring white lilies, or soft poppies bearing red petals. But one blooms in summer, the other in winter, so I wouldn't be able to bring them all at the same time. There is a literalism and a pedantry about Polyphemus here that comes across as simple and dumb. Both Hopkinson and Hunter, and I'm sure many others, call this out in their commentaries, and I think it's implied that this is for ironic effect, somewhat mocking. Maybe it is that, but still that's not quite how I'm receiving it right now. Polyphemus' pedantry is endearing to me, and it highlights his vulnerability, his intellectual shortcomings. I almost feel protective of him. And sure enough, he'll end up being bested and blinded by a man far cleverer than he, a stranger who came across the sea on a ship. Oh wait, time for some more unsubtle foreshadowing. But now, girl, I should learn to swim as soon as possible. Perhaps if some stranger should come sailing in his ship, that way I'll see how sweet it is for you to dwell in the deep. So come out from the sea, Galateia, and then after coming out, forget to return home, just like I do sitting here. If only you wanted to tend the sheep with me, and to set to milking and making cheese by mixing rennet in it. My mother alone is the one who is unfair on me, and I blame her. She never puts in a good word for me, even though she sees me wasting away day by day. I'll tell her that my head and both my feet hurt, so that she may suffer because I am suffering. Polyphemus is upset because his mother won't put in a good word for him. Kenneth Dover, in his commentary, makes the point that in a segregated society, often the only way a young man can effectively make contact with a girl is via his mother. But I don't know about that. No matter what the circumstances, I can't imagine it's a good look for a teen to get his mother to chat up a young lady on his behalf. Not that I would know. Oh, Cyclops, how are you so out of your mind? If you focus on weaving wicker baskets and gathering fodder to bring to your sheep, then soon you'd come back to your senses. Milk the ewe you have with you. Why instead do you pursue she who flees? Perhaps you'll find another, a prettier Galateia. There are many girls who invite me to play with them at night, and they all giggle when I listen. Clearly on land I seem to be someone. And that's the end of Polyphemus' song, when he says he doesn't need Galateia anyway because all the other girls want to play with him and laugh. Well, That's actually a far more layered and real thing than the critics seem to let on. Sure, one gets the sense that the girls are mocking him, teasing him and laughing at him, and perhaps Polyphemus suspects deep down that they are teasing him. Or perhaps not. Whether you call this deluded and cringe cope or something else, it's actually the best outcome for Polyphemus, or indeed any young unrequited lover to be in. He's moving on, and frankly, whether this next bunch of girls fancy him or are just taking the piss, well, that's a second-order problem. And remember, the poem started off with an introduction, ostensibly in Theocritus' own voice and addressed to his doctor pal Nikias, wherein Theocritus claimed that song or poetry was the cure for love, not medical treatment. Briefly, the poem ends by closing off that frame with 2 lines spoken in this Theocritean voice. Thus Polyphemus shepherded his life by singing, and he did better that way than if he'd paid cash. So what's the point in the frame and the ending? Scholars have debated for centuries, and personally I don't have that much to add, but Theocritus' point that the song was kind of a practical therapy for Polyphemus, getting it all out of his system and then thinking about other girls, whether he stands a chance with them or not, rather than wasting his time paying someone to find him a solution, is unironically good advice. Holtzmark dresses this point up in scholarly terms, but the message is actually quite simple, down to earth, and obvious to anyone past a certain age. Even so, this doesn't confront or resolve what we know will happen later in Polyphemus' life. It doesn't address the foreshadowing of the events of the Odyssey, with which Idyll XI is interlaced. Sure, by the end of the poem, Polyphemus is turning his attention away from Galateia to other girls, and that's the best course of action for him. And his song has helped him reach that point. But from what we know of him from Odyssey Book 9, he'll probably never find anyone. He'll end up living alone in his cave, the one he tried to persuade Galateia to visit, alone with his flock. There's some consolation in that in the earlier parts of Book 9 of the Odyssey, he actually seems to be living quite a nice life in his cave, and he genuinely loves and cares for his flock. But we know he'll have most of his flock stolen, and we know he'll be blinded and humiliated, and all those events are foreshadowed in this idyll. I was going to go to the library to do some more secondary reading on this poem, because I know there are far greater depths to it than those I've just banged on about. But I have a fan in my flat, and it's too hot to go to the library, so yeah. Anyway, I'll leave it to you to fill in the deep intellectual takes that I've missed. What's your own reading of this poem? Is it an ironic meta take, or actually a really emotional poem about a monster who loves a girl, will never get the girl anyway, and will turn into a broken, tragic hermit, hated and punished by the world, later turning his hatred on others and then suffering most at strangers' hands in a way tragically foreshadowed in this poem? Let us know in the comments. In the meantime, like and subscribe, and we'll be back soon.